Hey, what's going on, Who That Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And I have a special guest with me. I have college football and pro football analyst, and you probably know him from the second guest show, along with the Cajun Cannon Bobby A. Bear. We have Mike Detillier on the show. Thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we got to talk about the New Orleans Saints. The first question I want to ask you is about training camp. Now, this is training camp like we never seen before. We never seen anything like it. I mean, we're dealing with COVID-19, the coronavirus, and teams are really trying to do their best to try to keep these players safe. The Saints, no OTAs, no mini camp, and now Sean Payton has created a little bit of a camp bubble. So I want to get your opinion about what do you think about Sean Payton creating a bubble for his team?
Well, he's trying to do what he thinks, excuse me, is the right thing to do. And that's to pretty much quarantine those players in one spot.
Right.
And your focus is on football.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you can control.
Yeah.
You can't control the outside world.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a big thing in today's world, that where it's a built-in advantage for the Saints is this is a veteran team.
Right.
Okay. There hasn't been a lot of changeover offensively, defensively, special teams wise. Wasn't a lot of changeover in the coaching staff, just one leaving and Mike Nolan. So you've got all that coming back.
Right.
That's an advantage. You couldn't do this with a young team.
That's right.
I just think it would be almost impossible because you have an environment already in that locker room that you know the leaders, you know the guys that's going to take charge. Yeah. The coaches don't control a locker room. Right. Players do.
Yeah.
And I think he realizes that the focus for this team has to be razor sharp.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're going to derail quickly.
Yeah.
And I think he's done a really good job of that. You know, Sean was the first one. I go back, this was March, April, right at, I think at the end of March, early part of April, they said, listen, we're not going to have OTAs. Right. We're not going to have that rookie camp. You know, he foresaw what happened down the road for everyone else. And so I think for the quarantine bubble for him to keep him at the Lowe's Hotel, I think was a smart move. You know where everybody's at. You know players you can trust that, you know, hey, listen, I want to spend a little bit of time with my family or whatever. And for some guys who maybe want to go out.
Right.
So, listen, when we were all young at one time, you know, that's hard to do to say, hey, listen, you secluded right here. In one spot. But I think, you know, for Sean, it's all business. Yeah. And it's all business. That's what they're paying him to do, to be the head coach of this team and to win games. And so, I listen, I applaud what he's done. Let's see how well it can work because there is no book. You know, nobody wrote you the manual on how to do this. Everybody's walking on ground they've never walked on before. So I do think the veteran teams, though, have a built-in advantage.
Right.
And the fact that you know kind of the personalities of those players, you know the personality of the coaches, you know the work ethic, that sort of thing. And even training camp, you know, you're talking about this is like conditioning stuff today. This isn't out there on the field. And even a lot of it, like what we saw, you know, and I always use that term, is pajamas and slippers. You know, it was sort of walkthroughs, you know, and they were 7-on-7 type things. You know, it'll still be, you know, 12 days away before padded practice.
Yeah.
And so my thing is you can only get ready for a football season by practicing football things.
Yeah.
You can lift all the weights you want. You can be in condition. Man, the only thing that gets you ready for football is practicing football.
Yeah.
It's not a light switch. You can't flip it on and off.
That's true.
And just think about in all of our workplace environments, if you've been off now since January, and then you come back in August, you're not the same person. It takes you a little while to get back in that groove. Or if you go on vacation for a week or whatever, it takes you a little while because you're out of it. And so I think Sean's trying to create that environment to show, hey, listen, let's get ourselves in the best shape we in, and then let's overtake this and bring it into football skills. Because nothing, I think, gets you more ready than playing football no matter what. Again, conditioning is one thing. That's just the lead up into camp. But listen, nobody can teach you. Even if you're a great tackler, it still takes a little bit of time to get yourself in a position and to physically take somebody down. Now, I think the pitch and catch game comes around quickly.
Right.
Because, you can practice that, and that comes around fast. Man, is the physicality part, that offensive, defensive line, that linebacker coming in to fill that gap to make that tackle. There ain't none of that when you lifting weights and running. None of that involved.
That's true. I mean, there's so much, that Sean Payton has, tried to do to try to make sure that his team, is comfortable inside of the bubble as well. Like you said, I think he did an outstanding job. I mean, the fact that the New Orleans Saints, I mean, there's 0% of players, they actually have COVID-19. So he definitely wants to keep it that way. And I think about the fact that, like you said, players want to go out, want to have a good time. There's going to be a strong possibility, that they can actually contract that. And that'll stunt the growth of the team because you'll be waiting for a player, that could possibly contribute to the team right now and probably have to get coached up to speed. It'll probably take them a while in order for them to get back and also to get into the groove. But I do want to talk a little bit about
one of the things, too, is the reality. Yeah. That you're going to have players that get the COVID-19 that's going to test. Even if you asymptomatic, which, I see today, down sort of where I live at on the bayou, we were hit fairly hard. And there were 4 people that I knew of that passed away from it. Yeah. And yet there were people that had it, tested positive, and that were asymptomatic of it. They didn't realize they even had it.
Right.
They maybe felt not quite the same when get tested and everything else. So the medical staff now is really, and you talk about pressure, they got pressure on them,
right?
At this particular stage.
Because now you're
trying to keep these 80 guys as a group. And I think more than anything else, 2 things come to mind: building great depth. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to lose someone during the season if it's a 1 week, 2 week situation. Building depth on both sides of the football.
Right.
And if you're an opponent, and I've always believed this, that it's not who you play, but when you play them.
Right.
It's never going to be more evident than this year.
That's true.
Because you might catch a really good team, but they may have injuries, and maybe that COVID-19 has hit them in certain spots that they're not the same.
Yep.
And so it's not about who you play. We can look at this in April and say, oh, okay, this should be a win. This should be a win. That might be a tough one on the road.
Right.
Well, you can't do that this year. I just think more than any other year, depth, and also when you play them, I think is going to be a big part of how you finish schedule-wise.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think about what you just mentioned. You talked about depth. Which leads me to the next question I want to ask you. I want to talk to you about the wide receiver position of the New Orleans Saints. We know that the number 1 and the number 2 is Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. You signed Emmanuel Sanders in the offseason, but then there's, the number 3 wide receiver position, and it seems like it's going to be a pretty tough competition. So what do you think about the Saints' depth at wide receiver, and who do you think is going to be that number 3 receiver? Is it going to be Traquan Smith or possibly somebody else?
Well, Traquan, it's a big year for him. Okay. You put a 3rd-round pick in him. He's flashed it as a player. Right. He's never pieced it all together. Now, I think most of us felt they would use an early pick on a receiver. Mm-hmm. And then after the draft, the same people that were saying that flipped it and said, oh, well, at best, Traquan's the 5th or 6th option. Okay. Right. That's not, you're not in the real world. If you saying that, I mean, have you been living on Mars to believe that in this age of injuries and COVID-19, that, week to week, that third receiver is still going to be the third guy. He may be the number one guy.
Right.
So again, it's people spinning their stories to say, well, I was wrong. Listen, I think all of us thought they would pick an early round selection on a receiver.
Right.
That's not where Sean wanted to go. He wanted to go in another direction.
Yeah.
And I think that means that he's put this on the plate of Traquan, that, hey, listen, you got to step up this year. Yeah. It's not about talent. And I think he's a good route runner. And he has shown, man, he's got some bursts after the catch.
Yeah.
Is playing with confidence. And I'll never forget Eric Martin, when he was with the Saints, he was like, man, there are a lot of guys faster than me, a lot of guys quicker than me.
Right.
But you know what I had? I had confidence. Every time I stepped on that field, I was going to beat him.
Yeah.
What I don't see with Traquan is maybe he doesn't have that, or he hadn't had that ability to say, you know what? I'm going to beat you, and I'm going to continue to beat you. Right. There is a certain thing of athletic arrogance that the great players have. Right. Some of them want to tell you about it, and other ones, they just want to show you.
Yeah, true.
Time and time again. You watch Michael Thomas on that practice field, he's not playing like a guy that's got $40 million in his pocket.
Yep.
He's playing like a guy that I'm going to embarrass you if you don't come to play and you don't come to practice hard every week. With Traquan, you see bits and pieces of it, that it's not always there, that confidence part. Yeah. And hopefully that'll happen for him, because if not, somebody's ready to take your place. Okay. Yep. You have a guy like Ty Montgomery, who's an interesting player because he's played running back and wide receiver in both college and in the professional ranks.
Yeah.
They thought enough of little Jordan Humphrey to keep him on the active 53-man squad.
That's true.
Now, in training camp, the guy that really looked good was Emmanuel Butler.
Yeah.
And he did have an injury, but I think what happened in a game, the first couple games he played, he was a little jittery.
Yeah.
And you had to get that out of him. He was going to be a good player. It just, you had to get it out of him, kind of the nerves.
Yeah.
It's like Broadway, first night. Listen, you got to get the nerves out, because they got a night 2 and a night 3 and a night 5 and a night 20. You got to get it out of you real quick. And so it's an interesting competition at that wide receiver position, and who can help you also on special teams, I think is going to be vital. And the fact that Ty can play both running back and receiver gives you some options when you come down the cut down time with it. You might have a guy that say, you know what, he probably isn't our 4th or 5th best receiver, but man, he is a really good special teams guy. And I won't keep him because he can really help us there. So it might be a rookie, might be Marquez Callaway, who I saw play a lot. He was a guy coming out of Georgia. I thought he was going to Ole Miss. Man, all those receivers at that time, they seemed to be headed to Ole Miss. Yeah. And then at the last minute, he goes to Tennessee. He was averaging almost 20 yards a catch.
Right.
And, some of them were, he didn't run this route good. My thing is, did you watch the quarterback in that Tennessee?
Yeah.
It wasn't nothing to write home to mama about, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And he was making it work. So I'm interested in a guy like Callaway, because every year I think there's a guy there that feels, man, you disrespected me. You didn't pick me. I'm going to show the NFL what it's all about. So you've got a lot of players, but you don't have a lot of answers other than Montgomery, because you know what he can do as a running back and as a receiver. The rest of the guys, there's more question marks than there are answers.
Yeah, I agree with Ty Montgomery. Ty Montgomery, to me, is the guy that really stands out. I think that he can really flourish in a Sean Payton offense. I think about him with the Green Bay Packers and Mike McCarthy as his coach. Mike McCarthy is a really good offensive coordinator, and that kind of, helped him come to the forefront. I felt like him going to Baltimore and going with Adam Gase out there with the Jets, it really didn't help him, because it seemed like the Jets were more focused on the defense and the running game. And also with the Baltimore Ravens, it was kind of similar. So I don't think they really utilized his skill set the way that I feel like, Sean Payton can. Speaking of
Yeah,
competition,
I agree with that. And let me throw this in. If I had to pick a number 3 receiver today, it would be none of the guys we talked about. I think it's going to be Deontay Harris.
Wow.
The reason why is the week before they played Seattle and then afterwards on the Saints coaches show on WWL, Sean brought up Tyler Lockett because kind of pressed him a little bit on, are we going to see Deontay more as a runner and a receiver? And he said, man, I really want to. I really want to get him the ball more than what we have. And, my comparison to Deontay is he's a smaller version of Tyler Lockett. Yeah. He came in really as a return man, and that's what Lockett did great in college. But, he worked his way into being a starting receiver. I don't know that that'll happen to Deontay. All I know is one thing, man, he's electrifying with the ball in his hand.
Yeah.
And I think maybe when he was in Seattle, Sean went to the brink, but didn't say it, that maybe he had a little talk with Pete Carroll about, how did things work out with Tyler Lockett? How'd you bring him, into that particular deal? Right. So I think that the one guy I really wanted to see on offense this year progress as a receiver was Deontay Harris. Right. Because, man, he is something special with the football in his hands as a return man. And the NFL wasn't too big for him because you worried about it. I played in front of more people in a high school game than he played in college. Considered, assumption's not bringing in a lot of folks. And yet he was able to do it and the punt kick return game. His progression at receiver is something to watch because we're not going to be able to see it in a game until it's the regular season. How much Sean gets him more incorporated on offense, because you got to understand his size. You don't want to, almost as a pitch count with him, but jet sweep plays, reverses, wide receiver screen, just getting the ball out in the flat, spread the field out, throw it to him one-on-one. All I got to do is beat one guy, and then, I'm headed downfield. His progression as a wide receiver, I think, is a big area to watch this year offensively. It would be the 1A, 1B, because I want to see what happens at center guard. And I think that's crucial. But I also want to see the development of Deontay Harris on offense.
Yeah, I agree. And you actually touched on the next question I wanted to ask you was about the offensive line battle. Now, we've seen Eric McCoy, play center last season, and he did a good job. He was ranked pretty high according to Pro Football Focus. He was one of the best centers in the league, in my opinion. He really didn't give up too many big plays. But the Saints picked up Cesar Ruiz out of Michigan in the first round. And there is a competition that's supposed to be going on, but I have to be honest, I'm kind of skeptical about this competition. Do you think that is actually a legit competition, Eric McCoy versus Cesar Ruiz? Or do you feel that Sean Payton is going to allow Cesar Ruiz to play center and move Eric McCoy over to the guard position?
Having watched Ruiz as a high school player at MIG and watched him at Michigan, he's a natural center. Yeah. And I think in 2021, Cesar Ruiz is your starting center. But in 2020, he's playing guard. I think it's Eric McCoy's job to play center. Yeah. And we see a lot of times, because I'm a big center guy, I think other than quarterback, it is the most difficult position to play. Wow. You've got to make the calls. Okay. First thing is you got to make the snap right. Yeah. If you mess that up, then anything you do afterwards is a total screw up. Yeah. But you got to make the snap right, but you got to make the calls. And today, I think you see it changing in college football, and it'll have some major situation happen in the professionals down the road. There aren't as many edge rushers as a lot of good interior players. Right. The easiest way to get to a quarterback is straight up the middle, straight line. And you take away his ability to walk up in the pocket and make the throw. You're taking away his launch pad. Right. So as a center, you got to see that linebacker blitz or that safety that's coming in there. You got to be able to pick that up. Zach and I were watching practice last year. Standing on the sidelines, and Eric McCoy's playing center. And by the cadence, you knew you should have snapped the ball. Well, Andrus Peat and Teron Armstead, they like 3 yards downfield. And McCoy still got the ball between his legs. So there's some timing issues that have to get down when you're the center. Not only the calls, but you got to get the timing down with your quarterback. Do you want to give Drew Brees a new center 2 straight years?
Yeah,
goes to show how good Max Unger was. Man, listen, Max Unger's the greatest center to ever put on the black and gold.
Yeah, he was.
But it goes to show you, now you've used your top picks back-to-back years to replace him. That goes to show how good he is.
Yeah.
But I think for 2020, McCoy is your center and Ruiz is your guard. Yeah. But for 2021, I think they flop it around. I think Ruiz becomes the center and McCoy becomes the guard. I think Eric, just having watched him and the way he handles things, his physicality, his setup skills, I think he's a better guard prospect. And I think he's a really good center. I think he could be a Pro Bowl guard.
Yeah.
So this year, I think you'll see them both in practice at center and then at guard. But I think in the long run, it's going to come down to, McCoy's center and Cesar Ruiz he's going to be your guard this year.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, especially the fact that, no OTAs, no mini camp. I think that can kind of hurt the growth of Cesar Ruiz and, at that position as well. But, and like you say, it is a tough position to play. So I know that
really tough. I'm talking about college and pros. Man, people don't realize how difficult it is to play that center position. You got to pick up everything. Now, if you had a young quarterback, the other thing too is, because I've had a lot of centers tell me, man, you got a young quarterback and he's sort of amped up, good and bad, and you got to calm his nerves.
All right.
You got to, hey, just calm down. Everything's going to be okay. We got it. I got it up front. The thing that helps McCoy and Ruiz is Drew Brees can make those calls.
Right.
Drew sees something, he makes that call. Now, that's not going to be the case in 2021, but in 2020, Drew can make that call. He can see by the positioning, maybe that safety or that linebacker might be coming in. And it helps McCoy and that, hey, listen, okay, I got it now. I see it. Because sometimes, you concentrated on so many other things that you have to have. But I think to make this offense work the best, I think having McCoy at center with a year under his belt, and I think Ruiz will do well at right guard. The other thing, too, is who plays right tackle. Man, Ryan Remchak's the best in the game.
Yep, yeah, he is.
So, he can kind of nudge you and help you along a little bit along the way. And it was a Saints strength. But last year, you saw Larry came in heavy, and then he got hurt. And then he became, in that Minnesota game, a bit of a liability.
Yep.
And what they were doing is they were shifting their ends and have them nosed up over the guard, not over the tackle. And it's like, man, I ain't playing up against Ramczyk or Armstead. They shoved them inside, and they were up against Larry, and he was getting beat. So you can hear through Sean that really upset him in the offseason that sort of thing happened. And he's always paid a lot of emphasis and a lot of time on that interior offensive line. If it's been with Jeff Fain, they went out, spent a lot of money on Olin Kreutz. Max Unger, they traded Jimmy Graham basically for him in a first-round pick, and then spending money now back-to-back years on it. Jari Evans all those years. They tried to make Carl Nicks the highest-paid guard in the game. Tampa did. Tampa came in late, but then they went out and get Ben Grubbs. And so you can see that they've spent a lot of time and effort and money and draft picks on trying to build that interior because you know what? You want Drew Brees clean. You want him clean that he can stay in that pocket and pow, pow, pow. He can find his receivers.
Yeah, that's true. I think about that offensive line. Now, I think that they have a good mixture of youth and also veterans that can also help out some of those young players as well. But Mike, I want to say thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate you for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. And everybody, just make sure that you check out the Second Guest Show on Mondays along with Mike Detillier, Bobby A. Bear on WWL. I always enjoy listening to you all.
Cajun Stereo.
Yeah,
Cajun
definitely.
Stereo.
You guys are so entertaining, and also you guys have so much information, and I really enjoy it. But thank you so much again, and we really do appreciate it.
Anytime. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you.